Hello and good morning, everybody. My name is Ian Harkins, and this is Applerouth's digital SAT presentation. The digital SAT is coming, what international students and educators need to know. I have myself been with Applerouth. This year will be 11 years. By my accent, it'll surprise nobody, but I love working with international students coming to the United States for quite a lot, as was my path in life. Please forgive me, first of all, I'm fighting off a lurgy, but I have fever suppressants doing their job, so we will manage to get through this. First of all, there's a poll that should be live. This will just help us get to know you a little bit better and help us tailor some of our content that we send to you afterwards. We love to know who's coming, who's interested, what your backgrounds are. There will also be questions at the end, so throw them up on the chat and we'll be able to get to them afterwards. If indeed I don't manage to address your question during the presentation, then like I said, I'll get to them later. A quick thing about reminder who we are and what we do and why we do it. One of our fundamental beliefs is that when you change students' beliefs about themselves, you change their lives. How do we do it? We do that by academic tutoring, test prep, and executive functioning coaching. And it's that test prep mandate that brings us here today, because the SAT is changing yet again. The SAT has had several overhauls in living memory. I myself took the newly made test in 2005 when that dropped. Rest in peace, the writing section score. But these changes may be familiar in living memory for many of us. Fast forward to what's happening now. It's digital, it's adaptive, it's shorter passages, it's in total a bit shorter, and it's coming for us this year and next year. It is a substantial format change, which we'll talk about over the next hour. The College Board has been preparing for this test for years. This has indeed been a period the College Board has long planned for and been eager to make happen. They made no secret of it. They've been experimenting with computer-based tests in some places. They had to go through the AP administration online in 2020, where they learned some lessons. And now they're making the bold move, and personally I think the right move, to make Scantrons a thing of the past and to move to computer adaptive testing. For international students, the last paper-based test was December 2020. So I'm so sorry, if you are taking this outside of the United States, you are going to be forced into taking the digital SAT as of March 2023, when the next test is. In 1 year from now, the US-based students will be having that exact same conversation, because the March 2024 test will usher in an era of exclusive digital testing for the SAT. Here is again the timeline. They've been hitting all of their timing targets. They've been releasing practice tests this summer and autumn. There have been successful pilot programs of the digital SAT starting last August. We just had another special invite only one right before the winter holidays. They're hitting their benchmarks. They are moving. Next year, or this year, I suppose the next calendar year, the international SAT will go all digital, like I said. Next autumn, the PSAT will go all digital. And the fall will see the release of some much anticipated data on it. And then, as we said, from March 2024 and thereafter, everyone will indeed go digital. This gives us all the more confidence that they are moving forward as expected, that they have come out with some actual practice tests. This thing's happening, it's happening on schedule. We've got 4 very fun practice tests that you can find on collegeboard.org. You can also familiarize yourself with the Blue Book app, which is the exact same app that you'll be taking the test on. So it's up, it's functional, it's not buggy, and in fact, you can download it as educators. This is the app that students will be using. It's quite user-friendly. We didn't even need to read the instructions, honestly. It's pretty self-explanatory. It is streamlined, it's easy to find stuff. You can use the tools effectively, like the highlight function, the progress bar, etc. And you can click and put it away. It's all very elegant and very thought through. This is again exactly the same process is going to happen when you come into the testing center. You will bring in a device that has the Blue Book app that you'll have downloaded before. You'll have a little code. You punch in, the application blocks all other apps from running. So you enter the code at the test center, and a previously downloaded test will be activated and unlocked. Any accommodations that you've applied for will automatically be generated there and then. So it's really quite a straightforward process from the very beginning. And additionally, not just the adaptive tests. If anyone would like to nerd out even some more, these 4 additional are also available, but they're linear tests. This just gives you an idea more if you want to see the format of the new tests. This is perhaps the biggest question that I hear over and over. Why digital testing? Why make this change? Excuse me. Ultimately, these are much more consistent and reliable. I can't tell you how many students there have been of mine who struggle with just bubbling. I just had one student this last October, another one this December, be given wrong instructions by a proctor. But also there can be on-demand tests throughout the school day. Accommodations are easier to deliver. Security is so much easier, which I'll expand on more in a second. You get your results back sooner, and it saves time. And in the end, Mr. Applerouth has been saying that all testing goes in this direction, the way of the digital. As I said, paper tests are drastically less secure than digital. Paper tests lead to bad actors getting their hands on a copy. College Board has had to cancel tests regularly. I know that in the news in the past 2 years, the SAT needed to cancel several tests in Egypt for security reasons, for example. From the international perspective, domestically it happens all the time. Instead, now there will be a massive bank with baseline sections and adaptive sections. In any given room, no 2 exams will be the same. There'll be a unique test for each student. We think they'll be using something called templating, where for, say, a math problem, you can just change the numbers involved 1,000 times. So you can't, for example, memorize the answer is D14. For any student, it can be a different number and a different letter. In experiencing the test, here's what else you'll notice that's different. The test is far shorter. All that filling out your name and your school code to begin is gone. You just punch in that entry code and boom, there's your test. But students get more time as well per question. There are shorter reading passages, which we'll talk about later, but I think that's quite dramatic and very interesting. The calculator is always there for maths and is built into the system, which again, I'll also expand on. Some other changes. College Board is adding 2 additional international test dates. So finally, there'll be 7 per year, 7 tests per year for domestic students and for international students. It reflects how there is just so much more flexibility about when to give this, thanks to the shorter test. This coincides with a skyrocket in school testing we've seen. And then, as we said, there's the faster turnaround time. Here is a quick rundown of the dates. So those two new testing dates for international students will be November and June, starting this year in 2023. What is staying the same? The content predominantly remains unchanged insofar as what you are expected to know as a high school junior. This is particularly true for the math, although the method of delivery would be different. The reading and the writing sections are based off of one paragraph and one question at a time. So again, certain question types are going away. For example, paragraph connections, evidence-based questions, those paired questions of where can you, the second question asks, where can you find the best evidence to the previous question? That will be gone. Scoring is not going to change. It's still based off of an 800 per section, so cumulative 1600. I've got more intel on the scoring later on in this presentation as well. Reflect on the timing of the digital SAT. The total time is 2 hours, 24 minutes. That's including a 10-minute break. That's it. From the moment you press upload for the code, you're done in less time than it takes to watch a Marvel superhero film. But the timing per question is really advantageous towards the students as well. Here we go. Here are some numbers now on the timing per question. So each of the two digital SAT sections, and compare that to what the ACT's incarnation is. So any student with processing, or just students who feel pressured by time, this will be a far more appealing test, and the student will frankly probably do better as a result. And this is highly intentional. They did evaluations, they hired psychometricians, which I was very proud to be able to say on the first go, who declared that there were many more students who in mock-ups were able to finish the test on time and feel like their performance was more accurately reflected with what they were able to do. They're making it less speedy deliberately. Also as a way of balancing themselves against the ACT, which is deliberately a speed test. Here is the structure. It goes baseline reading, writing, adaptive reading, writing, 10-minute break, then math baseline, math adaptive break, math baseline, math adaptive, and then you're done for a total of 2 hours, 24 minutes testing. And then within every section, there are 2 experimental questions embedded, and it's pretty much impossible to tell what is what. They've done a good job in vetting the questions so that they're in line with the overall what the overall topics are. It's not like the 2005 test where there's one glaring extra section in a particular subject. It also allows the College Board to build question banks faster and faster. It's only 8% of the test, and again, I think it's very well handled. So, what does adaptive mean? So, first of all, one thing to be clear on: it is section adaptive, not item adaptive or question adaptive. The GMAT is an example of question adaptive, where each successive correct answer gives you an increasingly difficult subsequent question. But this will be section adaptive. You have one form, that's the baseline, and these initial questions can really influence your score. So let me use this to explain. So items in particular sections have different weights. The College Board has referred to this in some interviews as item response scoring. They have also let us know that all items within a section do not count for the same. Different items in the baseline sections are going to, in their algorithm, have stronger predictive value of a student's ability, and so they're going to carry more weight. There was a fascinating article where Tom Proctor, who's one of the leads at College Board, yes, his name is Proctor, if that is destiny for you. But there was this article in mytutor.com, which I will send to the group once I'm done, because I think it's really illustrative. They have said that they are going to release more information next academic year, so it could be as soon as the end of this calendar year, about how their scoring for the baseline works. It's a little bit paternalistic in his tone. The writer of the article seems to have gone to a conference and cornered him in a bar, but it seems paternalistic in that Mr. Proctor's attitude is, don't worry, our algorithm is very, very fantastic, but suffice it to say, don't try to game the system and answer the first section questions incorrectly so that you then get an easier question. Just, you want to be able to do the best you can, because ultimately the system will weed out those kinds of people. Here's the grid to explain this in another way. How you do on the first section in this adaptive section testing will determine which of the following sections you are handed. If you do well on the baseline, you'll get the questions that are on average harder than the baseline. If you fall below a certain threshold on the baseline, then you will receive the section that is the questions that are below the baseline difficulty on the next section. Now, to stress, this slide is an example of how this might work. I am not saying that these are the exact numbers. In fact, the College Board came out and said, don't try to figure out the algorithm yet, like I said. But in general, here's what the idea is. How you do on the baseline section influences the maximum score, or indeed the minimum score, that you can receive. So if I tank every question on the hard adaptive section, I cannot get below, say, 550, because I've already gotten those questions correct from the baseline. Similarly, if I am handed the easier section and I answer every one of those correctly, I still can't get above a certain threshold. Here I have it as 650, for instance. On the practice test we took, here were the cutoff scores for what gave you what subsequent section. Again, this is a general estimate, but here were the numbers we found. This will again only get more fleshed out as the College Board acquires more data on how the students are doing. But in general, 15 out of 22 was the threshold for the math section. The cutoff for the verbal reading was 18 out of 27. So it comes out to about 2/3 of the questions. And again, we're cautious about saying how different question items are weighted differently. We will get more information on that, I don't doubt, probably by this time next year. A little bit more on adaptive sections. So to stress, once you anchor your points from the baseline section, you cannot lose them, no matter how you then perform subsequently. Difficulty level is randomized on verbal, increases on math in each section, same as it does now. So this is, again, I bring this in because this is an example where this might go, but have a look at how, for example, if you're in the harder section and you get a total of 32 questions correct, you will get a better score on the reading writing section than if you were funneled into the easier section and got 43. So, you know, a really substantial question difference, but you will still receive a lower score on the reading writing section than if you had been funneled into the harder section. So we tried this out and we played around with different profiles in the mock test we've been given at least, and this is what we got. All the way down to if we got 4 total rights on the second section, which is worse than chance. And similarly is the math. But again, this assumes a perfect baseline score. The range is therefore likely to be still wider because the bottom can be lower. So Applerouth will continue to refine this, and we'll use this to create our own tests too, so that there'll be ample practice opportunities, way beyond the 8 that the College Board currently offers. And here are the scoring takeaways. If you're funneled into the easier module, you are sort of capped at roughly a 650 according to the mock. If you're funneled into the harder module, your floor is a 460. Modern tests, the tests that are the paper ones now, their scoring scales will vary by test, sometimes slightly, sometimes more than slightly, and this will probably reflect that. There is a big difference in difficulty when you get to the easier and harder modules, in particular for the math. They feel like different tests, quite frankly. We went through and assigned difficulty levels ourselves, but we're pretty confident in how these will skew. But this is just to give you a visual of what we found. So the blue in the middle is the baseline, it was the first section. Module 1. And that's a fairly standard difficulty level distribution. And there's really, to me, something to this. I like the idea that there is going to be an opportunity for students who are put into each section to showcase what it is they know. And to the College Board's thinking, this is greater efficiency. We're going to try to distinguish between students now by giving them more 3s and 4s for one group and more 1s and 2s for another. At least that is the premise of the adaptive engine. In terms of math, yes, there are significantly fewer problems. About a quarter of the test is gone. Of particular note is the reversal in the trend of how word problems and language have been ballooning. This is particularly pertinent for non-native English speakers. You know, I took some years of school in Spain, and I can assure you math is a lot easier when you do not have to combine it with a foreign language. The aim of this is to give test takers more pure math problems. So it's really testing math this time, not reading. And they're trying at the same time to cut down on idioms, odd turns of phrase, and get rid of the confusion sometimes behind, you know, what are they trying to ask me? It's more about math skills and it's less about reading skills. One other difference that it's worth noting that we found, the frequency of geometry and trigonometry questions is going to double. Currently, it stands at a tiny 8%. We counted through all items that these types of questions, this category of questions, went up to 15%. And then lastly, this might be the thing that I am the most thrilled about. Finally, we get to Desmos. I am thrilled about Desmos. So for those of you who might not know, Desmos is a freely available and excellent graphing calculator you can find on the web. The College Board is building Desmos right into their Blue Book application. So a student who's taking the math section of the SAT can open the calculator and have it with them for the entire test. And it's easy to access, which, let's face it, more accurately reflects how we do math in the real world nowadays. We have a tool right next to us that we use to support us. I took the math section with this, and it truly does feel like a different test. I think I already know that much more of what we as tutors will have to do to prepare students to feel very well acquainted with this test is to teach them the ins and outs of what the calculator can do. In that way, it sort of reminds me a lot of the now defunct Math 2 subject test. May she live in the halls of Valhalla, but that test so depended on a familiarity with a TI machine, for instance. The questions are indeed written for these calculators, and facility with the calculator is almost a prerequisite for answering some of these questions. There's going to also, by extension, be less mental maths to do. So, talking about the math content distribution, I jumped the gun a little bit and I mentioned geometry and trigonometry earlier because I thought it was worth highlighting. But here's a more full breakdown of the topic redistribution. I noticed that we'll still see the full range of questions. Nothing really is being introduced that's brand new. Nothing is being phased out. But certainly the importance of, say, percentage and probability is being diminished in favor of dispersing the topics of questions. And here is our analysis of the first two tests. There's no really one clear pattern. All this is to show that there is a variability, and it'll vary test to test and module to module. But certainly it's an exciting change. Algebra still is quite important. Data analysis maybe less so, but these are. It's great to see it's great again to see that no two tests are identical. So it really does mean you have to run the full gamut of topics while you are studying for this. Questions are actually, in fact, grouped by type when you take the test. So you can get into blocks of questions. Jed talked to me about how on a test that he did, he got 8 graphing questions all in a row, almost like a sort of its own subsection. The idea is that students can concentrate better rather than having to jump from topic to topic, which is again a very interesting way of leaning into how they are trying to create a test that really is supposed to demonstrate what a student knows. Okay, I am now going to move on to the verbal English section. But please feel free to ask me any more questions about the maths at the end too, and I'll try to answer them as best I can. For verbal, for the verbal, there really are some shifts here in formatting. So first off, we are accustomed at the moment to the 400 points coming from the reading and 400 points coming from the writing for a total of 800. Now it's all one. They've eliminated subscores. Oftentimes you can't even really tell what category an individual question would fit into. Would this be a reading question or would it be a writing question? Reading is shorter, but I'm not prepared to say that that means that it's easier. The level of the passages seemed to us to be higher, with even some old-timey English and even some heightened poetry in there. Previously, there'd be maybe one passage that might potentially be 1800s language. Here, there's quite a bit of it. And also, startlingly, it's one passage, one question. Next one passage, one question. And each of them are one paragraph. So the passages are each about 15 lines. You do still have to jump from topic to topic. You can't really sit with it. But counterbalance this with having all your types of problems put into order. So it expects you to digest a lot of little pieces of information quickly, but it is asking you to do so in the same way, in the same manner that we're used to. There is way less grammar, more vocab and context, which I think I would like to bring up here is perhaps, I'm cautious about this because it's perhaps a greater challenge for English as a second language students. We'll talk more about that momentarily. But the good news is that there is an elimination of idioms. That says idiomatic English language expressions. These are the questions I can't really explain why it's I accuse you of doing something and not I accuse you about doing something. These were just some questions sometimes in the writing that you were expected to know, and that can be particularly challenging for English as a second language students. So that's the great news for international students. Those are always incredibly challenging to teach. So there's more diversity of ideas, but with far smaller passages. Beg your pardon. Health is a lovely thing. So not only are questions grouped, but they come in the same order every time. The vocab questions will always precede, say, the author's intent questions, for instance. So practice really, really is going to pay off because you can get used to the pace at which they are asking you the questions. There's more humanities, and I think I said earlier, a smidge of poetry, more logical transition questions. Just to speak about the poetry for a moment, because this is new, although still rare. These can be as old as Shakespeare, plenty of pre-1900s writers. It's not clear to me yet if the College Board will expect students to know poetry vocabulary like they did for the literature SAT subject test, where you needed to know what a sonnet was, what a caesure was. I don't think so, but I'm not quite sure yet, and I'd love to see more examples when they come out. Rhetorical synthesis questions. So this is a new and kind of cool way to ask questions. So students are given a bullet point list instead of a passage, and they are asked to say, for example, give what would be a conclusion to draw from an experiment, or what should the student's next step be? And so all in one, it asks for summaries, inferences, and effective note-taking. It's really quite an interesting format of question. I quite like it. Here's the same data that I showed you for the math, what types of questions there are. And again, not every test is going to have exactly the same. Look at the rhetorical synthesis at the very bottom there. Form, structure, and sense, for instance, those are sort of quite substantially different. So emphases and frequency from test to test will change, but broad strokes, we can see what it is that we've got to, teach and what students are expected to learn. And indeed, it's very familiar at its core to what the test is now. Jed Applerouth did a quick analysis of all the different passages, types too, and divided them by 4 because he looked at the 4 digital tests to give us an idea of passage type frequency. Look at science. Natural science is getting a ton of love. The current SAT has 5 sections. Always begins with a literature, and it has a politics passage, a humanities passage, social science passage, and then 2 natural science passages. So still natural science is being given quite a lot of attention. Poetry not a focus, while natural science still takes the cake. Just to talk as well about the vocabulary, it's not traditional SAT vocab. I feel like in everyday language, like if someone uses a fancy word like, oh, an SAT word, gone are those days of flashcards. They are no longer assessing you on esoteric words like esoteric. They're common use words, but what to do with them in context is now what they're focusing on. And so once again, really, this is a way of testing your reading comprehension rather than serving as a simple vocabulary test. Okay. Now, I would love to take some time and talk about the on-the-day experience, which I hinted at earlier. Over time, the College Board is going to have many ways of testing so that in their words, all students will have a quote, highly comparable but unique version of the test. We don't exactly know what that means yet. Highly comparable, I'm assuming there are going to be some question templates that they use so that they can, as I said, insert some different numbers and answer choice orders, but still test the same material. Saying that this is going to make cheating by peeking at your neighbor's sheet or trying to get an answer sheet beforehand impossible. Sorry, I'm a huge stereotype of myself and sipping a cup of tea. Students can go through a quick demo when they download the app on their device. And on the day, they get start code, a good Wi-Fi signal, and as soon as they enter that in, they are off to the races. They get a break, they get a timer, they get instructions for their specific sections, and that's all they need. Classic multiple choice questions with some free responses like we have now will be the format. Students can use scratch paper and can bring their own pencil or pen, and you still get detailed score reports. Now, start answering some frequently asked questions. We're asked a lot of some version of this question. Do you think that this will be a train wreck? Because we didn't have a splendid experience in 2019 with the ACT rollout. So importantly, College Board isn't relying on schools' devices. If the internet goes out on you 10 times during the test, that's okay. You just need it at the beginning to download the test and then again at the end to upload it. Even if the power somehow goes out in the entire building, your place is saved wherever you left off. So there are more ways that College Board is improving accessibility. They are providing loaner devices. You know how to work the app way ahead of time. The test kind of behaves like a Google Doc in that it sort of saves everything that you've done. Every keystroke is time-stamped, as I say at the bottom there. And it allows you to pick back up without losing any time should there be a problem, something goes down. The College Board will also have a kind of help desk. There's no extra equipment needed. There'll be human beings actually assigned testing centers to help with common issues. And each testing center will have one dedicated testing room. and then a separate help room where the tech coordinator can walk a student through a problem without bothering anybody else taking the test. And these people will be able to help support students on the day too. So students can borrow devices if they submit for them well enough in advance. Students will have the ability to charge their device, to plug it in as well during the middle of the test. So hopefully, I think they're doing a very good job about trying to foresee any large scale problems and circumventing them now. And then they've given some really, really excellent tools. For example, the timer. It's lovely and it's there. You can hide it or show it with a button as you prefer. You can move it to different parts of the screen. You are no longer reliant on a proctor to announce time, sometimes missing when he should announce something, he or she should announce something, sometimes getting the time wrong. I've had many students be really frustrated and thwarted when that's happened to them. And more tools, the reference sheet. This is a sheet with the formulas for the math, but now students can have that alongside them. They don't need to flip back to the front of the test booklet, where oftentimes many students forgot it was even there. It is very easy to keep track of flagged items. I loved this feature, taking it. It shows me where I am in the test, which questions I flagged, which ones I omitted. I can toggle back and forth instantly rather than having to flip through to try to find what I'd circled before. I can annotate at will. I can hover over, I can click. Some students can use scratch paper, some students can take notes on the digital annotation. You know, for some students, there will be a transition away from the traditional test paper-based skills like underlining, starring, drawing arrows, but the habits are still very, very much there. Talking quickly about accommodations, another very common question. There's a greater seamlessness built in to any accommodations, extra breaks for some students, font sizes, colors, text to speech. It's all in that code. Desmos already accommodates to different allowances as well. So it's very well integrated. There will be a paper-based test for students who cannot take an online test. It will be slightly longer, and it will be recognizably linear. There'll be slightly more questions, no experimental questions, about half an hour longer. I should say as well, what I'm not clear about is who exactly will qualify, and does this open up to cheating again? Or is the College Board just going to lean on these kinds of ones to cancel more often? I don't know. I remain optimistic, however. Establishing ACT Concordance is another big query. Essentially, the concordance tables, according to the SAT, will be unnecessary because they intend to release research later this year to demonstrate how well their new test scores and their old test scores correlate with one another. And if that's the case, then we don't need to draw up a whole new table, and colleges and universities will know more what to do with those scores. A small caveat that we've noticed on concordance limitations, specifically the language that the College Board used was that they'll be linked versus equated. And international students who may have just taken the last paper-based test but want another go may be on the front lines of this. If you want to have a second pass at this test in March, we will have to wait and see later on this year how well those are indeed linked. Sorry, they will be on the front lines of this. They will be the guinea pigs. There is ample practice. One thing they're getting rid of is test return. Your test will no longer be returned to you optionally. You'll never see those questions again. You'll not be able to learn from them. They'll keep releasing practice tests, but not the test questions that you took. Every year they'll be retiring and releasing new questions. And eventually they've promised us we'll get 8 full tests. And I would suspect every year we expect they'll release more and more material, but they're very actively working on a total of 8 complete digital adaptive tests. That's not including the 4 paper ones that are already there. The first official scores from those pilot programs I mentioned are coming back. The first were in August. How did it go? Well, the internet did its thing for a bit. Some vocal people were unhappy, but that didn't necessarily reflect the broad swaths of students who did take it. So to say, how did this happen? How did I get such a low score? I crushed it. Well, sure, but you did you crushed the lower level adaptive section. I think there will be greater clarity given to students about how the scoring does work, but as was happening here. In survey data, though, of students who have taken both, 8 of 10 prefer the computer. So it does seem like this is a popular test. Why did students say they like it? Shorter passages, less arduous cognitive work, less sort of bleary-eyed brain hurts. Shorter passages, which means less skimming, trying to find whatever it is the question's referring to, which, that's more of an Easter egg hunt than actually testing you on your interpretation skills, and more time spent testing actual interpretation, more time per question. The calculator works better and can always be there, and the results come back quicker, days, cutting down that stress time of waiting. I feel like you give your infant child to daycare and they say, great, and here in return is a new virus every week. Okay. So whether to dive in or to wait. There are still ways to practice and to see. By all means, encourage students, if you're in a position to have a look at the Blue Book app, see how well they do on the official practice tests before determining whether or not they're ready. We don't anticipate that they're going to do an overhaul, that there are not going to be, we don't think that there are going to be many technical difficulties. As I said earlier, this seems like a smoother, better thought out transition that will ultimately be a more pleasant experience as the student, as the test taker. Here are some of the potential things though that we don't know yet. Will students push to take the ACT more? Maybe. Will we see a huge push of students trying to get things in this year in the US? Quite possibly. Anecdotally, I saw some international students trying to do that towards the end of last year, although it became impossible for some students to find a slot. So will there be more challenges trying to get spots, especially at the end of this year, for first semester juniors who just know that they do well at the paper test and just want to have this over and done with, don't even want to wait for the digital time? Quite possibly. Will colleges super score? College Board wants them to, and if everything goes accordingly, I don't see why not. But the real answer is that we don't know yet. Every admissions board is, again, going to have to make up their own minds about that. Here is the quote from the College Board themselves. They're trying to indicate not much will change from the admissions side. This did not happen in 2016 because the scores were so recentered. A midpoint was a 1000 on the 2015 test, and then it became like a 1080 on this current incarnation of the test. So most colleges and universities for a while said these tests are not comparable. So we will wait and we will listen like the College Board will. Response from the SAT, from the ACT, sorry. Nothing really yet. Great. I'll probably try to pick up some more business for students who feel spooked by a brand new test, but they haven't really said much of anything about this. So, how students can best prepare. Download the Bluebook app. Get comfortable with Desmos and contact us. We would be absolutely delighted to work with you. For our part, we already do offer fixed form digital tests for both the SAT and the ACT. We're already creating new materials we're going to deploy soon. And as we learn more about this, we'll continue to release our own materials more and more. It's what we do. We're ready for this. Nay, we have been eager for this change for a fair few years now. So this is a really, really exciting time. Again, it's been a pleasure working with you. Just a reminder again of who we are, what we do. Thank you very, very much for sitting through as I have hacked a lung up through this. So I'd love to have an opportunity to take your questions. If each official test is dynamic, unique set of questions. The question is, if each official test is dynamic, unique set of questions for each student, how will those tests be released afterwards for student review? So that's the answer. They don't. They will not be releasing those questions. They do send you in the score report the category of questions, and so you can see, like I did for the math section, for the reading section, like does that particularly deviate from the norm? But otherwise, no. I will also be sending this presentation out to people. So if you want to have a look at links and everything, you will be able to. I also promised the link to this article, which I found quite instructive and probably the best piece of information that's out there. I'll send it in the email, but you can see it in the everyone chat. Right now. If students are registered at the school's test center, but we are out of the country at the time, can they log in and take the test from another location? Perhaps in the future, yes. But for now, and I'd be quite excited about that, but for now, you do have to go into a room for the foreseeable future. Yes, the slides will be provided later. Should have said that at the beginning. What about the kid who really isn't tech savvy? This assumes a kid really knows how to move around on a computer laptop. I am that kid who is not at all tech savvy. I have a huge undiagnosed but definite allergy to any kind of coding. I don't feel at ease with computers a lot of the time, and I found this really straightforward. But that also said, there is time for a student, like I said, to work with the Bluebook app beforehand, so that they're not going in on the day when it actually matters, when it's game time. They're not going in blindly. So I would say that to everybody. Everyone can very freely download the Blue Book app. If you want to have a look at the test, just say you're a student, and they'll let you. The October PSAT be digital for international students as well? Yes, that's when the PSAT turns totally digital. I'm just trying to download. My laptop is too old. What are we going to do? Poor students who don't have sorry, I'm mumbling the question. I just tried to download the Blue Book, but my laptop is too old. What are we going to do with poor students who don't have the latest tech? The answer is that College Board builds in loaner devices. And I should say, Blue Book works really well with tablets as well. It's perfectly legitimate to bring in your own iPad, for instance. Are the linear tests available from the College Board different from the adaptive practice tests in Blue Book? Yes, insofar as they're linear and not adaptive, but they're really instructive, again, if you want to have a look at those formatting changes that I talked about, particularly for the reading, writing section. I have an international student who took the paper test in 2021 and scored a perfect 800 on the math. Nice. Then he took the digital test recently and did the full practice test online. He said he could not score above a 740 on math because he aced first half of the math baseline, and said the second half was all extremely challenging questions and he could not even finish them in time. Keep in mind, this boy is brilliant at math and scored an 800 on the paper test in May 2021. And his experience is not going to be isolated. That you are given many, many more difficult questions when you do this digital version. The thing, again, that I look forward to is how weighted are all of these questions going to be? It theoretically is going to be possible for a student to take a test at the same time as another student, and depending on which questions they get right, even if they miss more questions, to wind up with a bigger score. Yeah, that's some funkiness, and it's especially going to affect that student of yours, Jennifer, when you get into that higher level. When you're flirting with 740 is still the 99th percentile, you are really pushing the upper echelons of the curve. And so any little mistake fluctuates your score really wildly. Whereas if they were in the middle more, it wouldn't. All I can say is that this student is not getting 6 questions wrong, or 6 additional questions wrong, probably. The difference between 800 and 740 can be 2 questions, 3 questions, which is still a brilliant student at math, but feels perhaps much more chancy. I hope that was a good enough answer. When will the PSAT go digital in the US? In October. How do strong math kids score higher than a 740? Apparently, there are certain questions that are weighted more. He did not like the new SAT. Yeah. All right. Then if he doesn't need to take it, he is one of those students for whom the old test is different and better. I don't know if it's a simple question of this student of being more familiar with the formatting. So it affects the higher achievers, the kind of math students I work with who do better on the ACT. That is exactly the kind of student that the ACT is longing to gobble up. If this student feels more comfortable jumping from topic to topic as the ACT demands, and is comfortable with the ACT mantra of what do you know and how fast do you know it, then that is exactly the sort of student I might push to the ACT. He might very well be an outlier, but those students exist for certain. Thank you very, very much, Jennifer. Would you reduce statistical within? Why would they reduce the amount of statistics, probability, data analysis when those are more widely applicable skills? Because that is the direction that colleges, that is the direction that high schools seem to be teaching. The AP stats is widely less taken than the AP Calc, and yet you are completely correct, Ms. Georgia, that statistics is a much more ever-present skill in our lives. Let's sit down over a tall glass of something fizzy one day, and I'll expound more on that. Will College Board superscore between paper and digital as transitioning occurs? So again, that's something, it's not up to College Board. It is up to the individual schools. College Board really wants them to, but it is up to each individual school whether they see enough information that they say, yes, these are comparable tests, and so we feel comfortable super scoring. I've reached the end of the questions. I hope that my answers have been helpful. Thank you all so much, and we'll be reaching out again to anybody who wants any other additional questions answered or needs any help. We'll be sending out the presentation. And thank you very, very much. I assure you, I normally cough far less than this. Anyway, thank you so much, and have a lovely rest of your day.